Empty lunchboxes. The front door slammed, the sound echoing in the otherwise still house, followed by the plop of Michael's backpack. Working from his makeshift home office, James flinched, the noise a sharp intrusion on the carefully constructed quiet. He left his desk, a twist of anxiety tightening his gut. Lately, Michael's arrivals felt less like joyful homecomings and more like pronouncements. He discovered Michael in the kitchen, already attacking a bowl of day-old chili, a crimson smear across his cheek. Usually fastidious, today the boy devoured the meal with an almost frantic energy. "Hey, easy there, champ," James said, leaning against the jam. "Pace yourself." Michael mumbled something indistinct, his face buried in the bowl. James' brow furrowed. "How was school?" Michael swallowed, finally lifting his eyes. The usually bright orb seemed clouded, almost guarded. "Fine," he offered, the word flat and toneless. "Just fine." James probed gently, stepping into the kitchen. He brushed a stray lock of hair from Michael's forehead. "Anything happen worth mentioning?" Michael shrugged, returning to his chili. "Nothing much." James observed him, a burgeoning unease settling within him. Typically, Michael bubbled over with stories, even the most trivial. He'd launch into enthusiastic reenactments of a captivating science lesson or complain volubly about a chatty classmate. This reticence was new, and it disturbed him. "Did you finish your lunch?" James asked casually, aiming for lightness. Michael paused, his spoon suspended midair. "Yep," he said eventually, but the affirmation lacked conviction. He crammed another spoonful of chili into his mouth. James knew something was amiss. He'd packed a hearty lunch, a turkey and Swiss on whole wheat, apple slices, carrot sticks, and a yogurt tube. A balanced offering designed to fuel him through the afternoon. He'd even tucked in a corny joke on a napkin, hoping for a smile. "Everything all right at school, Michael?" James asked, layering his words with concern. "Is anyone giving you trouble?" Michael tensed slightly. "No, Dave. Everything's cool. Can I get more chili?" He extended the empty bowl, avoiding his father's gaze. James accepted the bowl, his mind working furiously. He refilled it, his eyes never leaving Michael. The boy looked thinner than usual, he noted with alarm, his face a little gaunt. And the constant hunger, it was all adding up. "Homework first, then more chili," James countered, his voice firm but kind. "Go grab your bag." Michael grumbled but obeyed, trudging from the kitchen. James watched him go, his worry solidifying into a dark premonition. He knew his son. Michael was a good egg, honest and direct. This evasiveness meant something significant was wrong. After Michael vanished to his room to tackle his homework, James quietly retrieved Michael's school bag from the hall. He unzipped the main compartment, his heart drumming against his ribs. He knew he was violating a trust, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he had to know. The bag felt surprisingly weightless. He extracted textbooks and notebooks, placing them on the nearby table. At the bottom of the bag, lost amidst a few crumpled papers, was Michael's lunch kit. James picked it up, his hands almost trembling. It was a blue lunchbox emblazoned with a cartoon astronaut, a gift from his mother. He unzipped it, his breath catching in his throat. Empty. Utterly, completely empty. Not a crumb, not a stray carrot stick, not even a discarded yogurt wrapper. It was as if it had never held food at all. James stared into the void, his thoughts racing. Michael had lied. He hadn't eaten his lunch. But why? And where had it gone? A wave of fierce protectiveness washed over him, a primal need to defend his son from whatever plagued him. Something was happening at school, something that was silencing Michael, and James was determined to uncover it. He carefully closed the lunchbox and placed it back in the bag, smoothing the wrinkles in the fabric. He needed to proceed with caution. He didn't want to frighten Michael further or make him feel cornered. He needed to earn his confidence, to create a haven where Michael felt safe to confide. He walked to Michael's room and leaned against the doorframe. Michael sat at his desk, immersed in his math textbook, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Need a hand with that?" James asked gently. Michael glanced up, his expression shuddered. "No, I'm good." James walked over and sat on the edge of the bed. "You know you can always talk to me, right?" Michael nodded, but his gaze drifted away. "Anything you want to share about school today?" James pressed, his tone soft and encouraging. Michael shook his head, his lips sealed tight. James sighed inwardly. He knew he couldn't force it, but he also knew he couldn't ignore it. He had to find a way to pierce Michael's silence, to discover the truth behind the uneaten lunch. "All right," James said, rising. "Well, I'm here if you need anything. And remember, I love you." He ruffled Michael's hair and left the room, quietly closing the door. As he returned to his office, he began to strategize. He couldn't rely on Michael to volunteer information. He would have to investigate independently. The following morning, James packed Michael's lunch with extra care, striving to make it enticing. He even added a chocolate chip cookie as a surprise. As he passed the lunchbox to Michael, he said, "Have a great day, sport. And remember, your mom and I love you something fierce." Michael mumbled a reply and rushed out the door, clutching his backpack. James watched him leave, his heart burdened with worry. After Michael departed, James went to his office and retrieved a small digital recorder from his desk, a device he occasionally used for recording interviews or brainstorming sessions. He weighed his decision, wondering if he was crossing a line. But the image of Michael's hollow cheeks and the emptiness of the lunchbox steeled his resolve. He activated the recorder and discreetly slipped it into Michael's backpack, concealing it within a zippered compartment. He knew it was a gamble, an invasion of Michael's privacy, but he felt he had no alternative. He needed to understand what was happening to his son, and he would do everything in his power to safeguard him. That afternoon, James endured an agonizing wait for Michael to come home. The minutes crawled by, each tick of the clock amplifying his growing apprehension. He paced, mentally revisiting every conversation he'd had with Michael in recent weeks, searching for overlooked clues. Finally, he heard the familiar slam. He hurried to the kitchen, forcing himself to appear unconcerned. Michael entered, his face pale and tired. He dropped his backpack with a thud and went directly to the refrigerator. "Hey, pal." James greeted him, his voice carefully even. "How was school?" Michael shrugged, grabbing a carton of milk. "Okay," he mumbled, taking a long gulp. James observed him, his stomach twisting. He knew he couldn't confront him yet. He needed to hear the recording first, to gather the information he needed to decipher the situation. "Did you eat your lunch?" James asked, holding his breath. Michael hesitated, his eyes flitting away. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I ate it." James's heart plunged. The lie hung between them, a palpable weight. He knew he couldn't let it fester. "All right, buddy," James said, his voice steady but gentle. "Go get started on your homework. We can talk later." Michael nodded and escaped to his room, leaving James alone in the kitchen, his thoughts swirling. He waited until he was certain Michael was occupied, then quietly retrieved the backpack from the hallway. He unzipped the pocket and carefully removed the voice recorder. He plugged it into his computer, anticipation thrumming through him as the file loaded. He put on his headphones, took a deep breath, and clicked play. The initial moments were filled with the sounds of the school day, rustling paper, the low thrum of voices, the scratch of chalk. Then he heard Michael's voice, small and uncertain. And then another voice, deeper, authoritative, a voice that sent a shiver down James's spine. A voice he recognized, a father's worry. The breakfast bacon felt like a lead weight in James's gut, a queasy anchor mirroring the dread that deepened with each tick of the clock. The scratchy recording haunted him, Mr. Clark's voice a spectral presence he couldn't shake. He gazed out at the street, its ordinary cadence now a jarring, unsettling symphony. Prudence was paramount. A reckless assault on the school was out of the question. He needed strategy. When Michael bounded in later, a carefully constructed veneer of cheerfulness masking something, James strived to emulate that normality. "Hey, sport, how was the day?" he asked, leaning against the counter, aiming for nonchalance. Michael merely shrugged, his backpack hitting the floor with a muffled thump. "Fine. We did fractions in math." "Fractions, eh? Some tricky business. Finish your lunch," James inquired, his gaze unwavering. Michael's movements were furtive as he wrestled with the refrigerator door, emerging with a carton of juice, avoiding eye contact. Yep, ate it all. The fabricated response hung between them, clumsy and conspicuous. Everything, James pressed, keeping his tone even. Even the apple slices? He recalled packing them with care, their sweet fragrance permeating the morning air. Michael gulped the juice, the tendons in his neck taut. Yeah, everything. He finally met James's gaze, but only for a fleeting instant before darting away. James glimpsed a brief flicker of distress, or perhaps guilt, on his son's face. A sigh formed in James's chest. To push now would only drive Michael further into his shell. A different tactic was needed. Good to hear you're eating. You were ravenous last night. Big day tomorrow. I'm sure you'll ace it. Sleep offered no respite that night. The image of Michael surrendering his lunch to that predator replayed incessantly behind his eyelids. He thrashed, the bedsheets a tangled prison. He briefly entertained the idea of calling the school, directly confronting Mr. Clark, but knew it would serve only as a warning, granting him the opportunity to conceal his actions to further manipulate Michael. He required more intel. He needed first-hand confirmation. The following morning, James called in sick to work, fabricating a raspy cough and a raw throat. A stab of shame pierced him. Honesty had always been a bedrock principle, but this felt justified. This felt like a battle for his son's well-being. He dropped Michael off, adding an extra squeeze and a hushed, "Have a great day, bud. I love you." He watched until Michael disappeared inside, then circled the block and parked out of sight. He settled in for the vigil. The morning stretched on, each minute an eternity. He mindlessly scrolled through news articles, his anxiety escalating. He observed the quotidian, parents dropping off younger children, dog walkers, life unfolding in its ordinary fashion while his own existence felt precarious. At last, the bell's shrill ring announced lunchtime. James surveyed the swarm of students erupting onto the playground, a kaleidoscope of colors and cacophony. His gaze swept across the throng, his pulse quickening. There, he spotted Michael, standing near the basketball court, a picture of isolation. And then he noticed him, Mr. Clark. He lounged against the brick wall, a self-satisfied smirk playing on his lips. James watched, his blood turning to ice water, as Mr. Clark approached Michael. Though the words were inaudible, the exchange was clear. He saw Mr. Clark gesticulate, saw Michael wince almost imperceptibly, saw Michael reach into his lunch bag. He watched as Michael surrendered his entire lunch. The sandwich, the apple slices, the small bag of carrot sticks. Mr. Clark accepted it all, his eyes gleaming with a possessive triumph. A wave of scorching rage threatened to consume James. His grip tightened on the steering wheel, his knuckles bone-white. He fought the urge to charge out, to confront Mr. Clark immediately, forcing himself to remain composed. He needed more proof. He witnessed Mr. Clark amble away, devouring Michael's sandwich, leaving Michael solitary, his head lowered. James knew the time for inaction was over. This wasn't merely about stolen food. It was about authority, about subjugation, about an adult exploiting a child. He drove home, his thoughts a whirlwind. He had to shield Michael, not only from Mr. Clark, but also from the lingering scars of this experience. He reflected on his own absent father, and the vow he'd made to provide the stability he had lacked. Being a single parent was a perpetual high-wire act. Juggling work, school, homework, dinner, bedtime stories, it was grueling. But he cherished it unconditionally. Michael was his world, his burden, and his greatest joy. Back at the kitchen table, the recording device sat beside him. He replayed Mr. Clark's voice, the insidious cadence sending chills down his spine. He contemplated Michael, his gentle, trusting nature, his eagerness for approval. He now grasped why Michael had remained silent. Fear, confusion, perhaps even a misplaced sense of responsibility had kept him quiet. James closed his eyes, inhaled deeply, and resolved to act. Tomorrow, he would visit the school. He would demand a meeting with the principal. He would present the recording. He would ensure that Mr. Clark never preyed on another innocent child. He would be Michael's bulwark against the world. He would be the father Michael deserved. He would set things right. He had no other choice. The playground secret. Anxiety clawed at James, a feeling of helplessness he hadn't known since before Michael's birth. That fear had been a shapeless cloud of the unknown, the weight of looming fatherhood. Now, it was a dagger, precise and aimed at his boy. He parked a street away, the autumn sunlight glancing off the car's hood. Responsible parent, he lectured himself, just checking on Michael's adjustment. A concerned dad, period, yet his hands trembled on the wheel. Lunch, 12:15. At noon, he crossed the avenue, melting into the thin pedestrian flow. He skirted the edge of the schoolyard, eyes peeled for Michael. The air carried the scent of decaying leaves and the faint, metallic bite of the fence. He spotted him by the ancient oak, the playground's de facto center. Alone, Michael nudged a stone with the toe of his shoe. James found cover behind a dense yew hedge, affording him a clear, discreet vantage. He felt like an intruder, a role that chafed against his straightforward nature. Michael remained still for minutes, seemingly lost in some private world. Then, Clark appeared. He sauntered toward Michael, a manufactured bonhomie radiating off him that James instantly distrusted. The hand on Michael's shoulder felt invasive, crossing a line of familiarity. James strained, futilely, to hear over the cacophony, the delighted shrieks of children, the steady thump of a bouncing basketball, the hum of distant traffic, their words lost in the din. He watched, gut twisting. Clark's posture was relaxed, yet his gaze held an unsettling intensity as he spoke. Michael's shoulders drooped, head bowed in what looked like defeat. He appeared, diminished. Then Clark pointed toward Michael's lunchbox, a vibrant blue emblazoned with rocket ships. Ice flooded James's veins. He watched, rooted to the spot, as Clark spoke again, his tone soft and coaxing. Hesitation flickered across Michael's face. Then, slowly, reluctantly, he surrendered the lunchbox. Clark accepted it with a smile that felt more like a grimace, fleeting and predatory. James's vision tunneled. A roaring filled his ears, silencing the playground clamor. He felt a surge of rage. Clark strolled away, bearing Michael's lunch as if by right. Michael stood motionless for a moment, watching him depart, his slight frame radiating utter dejection. Then he shuffled toward the swings, his steps heavy. James remained hidden, his fists clenched until his knuckles burned. He wanted to explode from his hiding place, confront Clark, demand answers. But he couldn't. Not yet. He needed to understand the scope of this. The bell shattered the moment, signaling the end of recess. The children surged toward the building, Michael among them, eyes downcast. James waited for the exodus to complete before emerging from the hedge. He walked to the spot where Michael and Clark had stood. The pebble Michael had been kicking lay there, scuffed and insignificant. James picked it up, rolling it between his fingers. It was just a common stone, yet it felt like a solid piece of the injustice he'd witnessed. The playground, usually a symphony of joy, now felt tainted, the vibrant hues of the equipment muted, the atmosphere thick with foreboding. He trudged back to his car, the image of Michael handing over his lunchbox seared into his memory. The recording, the one he dismissed as an overreaction, now felt like a premonition fulfilled. He gripped the steering wheel, fingers bone white. He couldn't ignore this. He wouldn't. Michael was his responsibility, his sacred charge. And his boy was being preyed upon, right here in the open, in the middle of the day. He started the engine, its growl a mirror to the storm inside him. He had to know why. He had to make it stop. He had to protect Michael, whatever the cost. The trust he'd placed in the school, in the system, in the supposed guardians of his son, lay in ruins. Now, only resolve remained. Hidden evidence. The image of Clark's hand closing over Michael's sandwich replayed in James's mind. A slow burn of fury simmered beneath the surface, threatening to erupt. He scrubbed a hand over his face, the rasp of stubble a grounding sensation. He couldn't just barge into the school, guns blazing. Accusations without proof would get him nowhere, might even make things worse for Michael. He needed evidence. He paced the length of his study, the familiar scent of old books and leather doing little to soothe him. The digital clock on his desk blinked mockingly. 3:17 p.m. Too late to go back today. Tomorrow. Tomorrow, he'd be ready. His first instinct was to call Sarah, tell her everything. But the words caught in his throat. What did she do, really? Worry? He knew she'd support him, but this felt like something he needed to handle himself, at least initially. Protect Michael. Shield Sarah from the ugliness of it all. He knew it wasn't entirely rational. This needed to be the lone protector, but it was a deeply ingrained instinct. He stopped pacing and stared out the window at the darkening sky. Rain threatened, the air thick with humidity. He considered his options. Confronting Clark directly? Too risky. He might deny everything, become even more careful. He needed irrefutable proof. His gaze fell on his phone, lying innocently on the desk. Of course, a recording. Subtle, discreet. He could position it in his car, angled towards the playground. It wouldn't capture video, but audio was enough, more than enough. He imagined Clark's oily voice, the subtle pressure, the quiet coercion. The thought made his fists clench. He picked up the phone, his fingers clumsy as he navigated to the voice recorder app. He did a test run, whispering a few sentences, then playing it back. The sound was surprisingly clear, picking up even the faintest rustle of paper. Perfect. Now the plan. He couldn't just sit in the car, obviously. That would be suspicious. He needed a reason to be there, a plausible excuse. He could pretend to be waiting for a phone call, needing a quiet spot. Or he could feign car trouble. The car trouble idea had potential. A flat tire. Simple, believable. He even had a spare in the trunk, though he hadn't changed a tire in years. He pictured himself fiddling with the lug nuts, looking convincingly distressed, while the phone recorded everything. He went to the garage. The cool air a welcome contrast to the stifling humidity in the house. He checked the spare tire, making sure it was inflated. Then he gathered his tools, a lug wrench, a jack. He even found a pair of old work gloves, stained with grease. He felt a strange sense of purpose, a grim satisfaction in preparing for this clandestine operation. Back in the house, he rehearsed his lines, muttering under his breath. Damn it, a flat tire. Just my luck. He even practiced a frustrated sigh, trying to make it sound authentic. It felt ridiculous, absurd. He was an accountant, not a spy. But the image of Michael handing over his lunch with that hesitant look on his face fueled his resolve. He spent the rest of the evening researching the school's layout online, studying satellite images, pinpointing the best location to park his car for optimal audio capture. He noted the position of the playground, the usual routes children took after school, the location of the nearest security cameras. He felt a growing sense of unease, a creeping feeling that he was crossing a line. But he couldn't stop now, not when Michael's well-being was at stake. As he lay in bed that night, sleep eluded him. His mind raced, replaying the events of the day, anticipating the confrontation to come. He imagined Clark's reaction when he was exposed, the school's response, Michael's relief. He clung to that last image, that vision of his son's happiness, as he finally drifted off to a fitful sleep. The next morning, James woke before dawn, his body tense with anticipation. He went through his usual routine, making coffee, reading the news, but his mind was elsewhere. He checked his phone again, making sure the recorder was fully charged. He even practiced his flat tire routine one last time, just to be sure. He dropped Michael off at school, forcing a smile, telling him to have a good day. He watched as Michael disappeared into the crowd of children, a small figure swallowed by the anonymity of the schoolyard. A wave of protectiveness washed over him, a fierce determination to shield his son from harm. He drove home, his heart pounding in his chest. He had a meeting scheduled for 10 a.m., a crucial presentation that he had been preparing for weeks. But he couldn't focus on spreadsheets and profit margins. Not today. Today, he had a more important job to do. He waited until 9:30 a.m., then drove back to the school, his toolbox and phone in the passenger seat. He found a spot near the playground, just as he had planned. He took a deep breath, steeled his nerves, and got out of the car. He pulled out the jack, the lug wrench, and the spare tire. He loosened the lug nuts on one of the tires, then positioned the jack. He started to crank, his muscles straining, his brow furrowed in concentration. He made sure to groan occasionally, adding to the authenticity of his performance. All the while, his phone, carefully concealed in his jacket pocket, was recording. He could hear the distant sounds of children playing, their laughter echoing in the air. He hoped, prayed, that Clark would show himself. He hoped he hadn't scared him off. Time seemed to stretch on forever. Cars drove past, their occupants glancing at him with a mixture of curiosity and pity. He ignored them, focusing on his task, his ears straining for any sign of Clark. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he saw him. Clark. He was walking towards the playground, a lunch bag in his hand. James's heart skipped a beat. This was it. Tricky words. The engine's heat radiated a soft rhythm under the hood as James, pressed against the gnarled bark of an old oak, felt its texture score his back. The slanting rays of late afternoon painted the playground in elongated shadows, transforming the familiar space into an unsettling theater for his dread. He adjusted the miniature recorder tucked inside his jacket, ensuring the mic was secure. A knot of unease tightened in his chest. This felt like a violation, an intrusion, yet the memory of Michael's haunted gaze yesterday hardened his resolve. He located Michael easily, a solitary figure diminished by the surrounding clamor of children. He listlessly nudged a deflated soccer ball. Then, as if conjured, Clark appeared beside him, an arrival that struck James as unnervingly seamless. He pressed record. Clark was all practice charm, a display of calculated affability. James's gut clenched as he watched Clark clap Michael on the shoulder, a gesture that seemed excessively familiar coming from a teacher. "Michael, my man, how's soccer going?" Clark's voice, subtly amplified, sounded artificially buoyant. Michael scuffed his shoes, avoiding eye contact. "It's okay, Mr. Clark. Just messing around." "Messing around? You've got the physique of a future star, Michael. You need to fuel that potential, you know?" Speaking of fuel, Clark paused, a theatrical beat that sent a shiver down James's spine. "I had a morning from hell, completely spaced on packing lunch. My brain's running on empty here, and Mrs. Davison's breathing down my neck to grade those torturous calculus exams. Absolute agony. Michael, pure agony." James tightened his grip on the recorder. The manipulation was nauseatingly obvious. Michael glanced up at Clark, sympathy warring with a flicker of discomfort in his eyes. "Oh, that's awful, Mr. Clark." Clark sighed with excessive drama, raking a hand through his impeccably styled hair. "It is, Michael, a tragedy. I hate to even ask, but, well, you wouldn't happen to have anything to spare, would you? Just a little something to keep me from failing half the class by accident." He chuckled, a low, wheedling sound. James could practically see the gears turning in Michael's head. He was such a generous boy, almost pathologically so, always striving to please. Clark was exploiting that very trait, twisting it into something repellent. I have my lunch," Michael mumbled, his voice barely audible. "You do? Magnificent. You're a lifesaver, Michael. A genuine lifesaver." Clark's tone shifted instantly to one of effusive gratitude, a jarring contrast to his earlier self-pity. "But, hey, I wouldn't want you to go hungry. Are you absolutely sure you can spare it?" James held his breath, silently urging Michael to refuse. "Yeah, I guess," Michael said quietly, his shoulders subtly slumping. "I had a big breakfast." A lie, James knew, his anger flaring. Michael had barely touched his food this morning, too preoccupied with something to eat. Clark beamed, his teeth gleaming in the waning sunlight. "You're a champ, Michael. A true champion. You know, sometimes we have to make sacrifices for the greater good. And you, my friend, are forfeiting your lunch to ensure the mathematical enlightenment of an entire generation. That's pretty heroic, if you ask me." He reached out and tousled Michael's hair, a gesture that now felt invasive, almost predatory. "Now, tell you what, you just concentrate on being a star athlete, and I'll wrestle with the algebra." "Deal." Michael nodded, his gaze fixed on the ground. He reached into his backpack and produced his lunch bag, offering it to Clark. "Besides," Clark lowered his voice confidentially, "a mind as sharp as yours probably barely needs any fuel anyway." He winked, then turned and sauntered off, whistling a jaunty tune, leaving Michael alone on the playground, listlessly kicking the deflated ball. James remained concealed behind the tree, the recorder still capturing sound. He rewound the last few seconds, the insidious words reverberating in his mind. "You're resilient. You can handle it. A little hunger never hurt anyone." His hands began to shake. This was far more than a stolen lunch. It was about dominance, manipulation, and the insidious method Clark was employing to prey on Michael's inherent vulnerability. The simmering anger within him surged into a boil. He felt an overwhelming urge to protect his son, to shield him from this toxic influence. The carefully crafted plan now felt inadequate, flimsy in the face of Clark's deliberate cruelty. He wanted to charge out there, confront Clark, and dismantle him word by word, until only the hollow shell of a manipulator remained. He clenched his fists, forcing himself to draw a steadying breath. He couldn't afford to react impulsively. He needed to remain calculated, strategic. He possessed the evidence, irrefutable proof of Clark's actions. He would use it. He would ensure Clark never victimized another child. He waited until Michael had left the playground and headed towards the crossing. Only then did James emerge from behind the tree, the recording device feeling weighty in his pocket. He walked toward his car, his gait determined, his mind already churning, mapping out the next stage of his operation. He wasn't merely dealing with a teacher who forgot his lunch. He was confronting a predator, and he would treat him as such. The hunt had begun. Confrontation. The recording's abrupt end was a gunshot in the quiet, the sudden silence amplifying the frantic pulse pounding in James's head. He yanked out the earbuds, the cheap plastic a negligible sting against his skin. Michael's eager-to-please voice echoed, "Each okay, Mr. Clark," a pinprick of guilt. But it was Clark's wheedling tone, the veiled demands masquerading as encouragement, that truly stoked the fire in James's gut. A deep, primal protectiveness surged, eclipsing everything else. He hadn't permitted himself this raw feeling since childhood. The memory of his own defenselessness, the suffocating powerlessness against adult manipulation, resurfaced with unwelcome clarity. He'd buried those memories, convinced they were a dead issue. But Clark, that insidious creep, had resurrected them. He slammed the laptop shut, the small desk rattling in protest. He needed action, not analysis. Another moment spent dissecting the situation's subtleties, weighing calculated responses, was a moment too long. Michael was vulnerable, and that truth was his only compass. He snatched his keys and phone, adrenaline flooding his system. Forget calling the school. He required Principal Thompson's immediate, unvarnished reaction, a guarantee that this would be handled with decisive force. The drive was a sensory washout. The familiar streetscape, the rhythmic pulse of stoplights, blurred into irrelevance. He abandoned his car in the visitor's lot, heedless of the minivan's indignant horn as it maneuvered around him. Pushing through the school's entrance, the automatic doors hissed open, an automated warning he ignored. The characteristic blend of floor polish and warmed-over cafeteria fare, usually a nostalgic comfort, now felt cloying, tainted by Clark's presence. Mrs. Davison, the school secretary, looked up, her customary cheerfulness replaced by a flicker of concern. "Mr. O'Connell, is everything all right? I need to see Principal Thompson." "Now," James stated, his voice tight, barely acknowledging her. "He's in a meeting, Mr. O'Connell. May I take a message?" "No," James said, his volume ratcheting up. He forced a calming breath. "This is an emergency. It concerns a student's safety." Mrs. Davison's eyebrows shot up. She paused, then reached for the phone. A brief, hushed conversation ensued, ending with a nod. "He'll see you, Mr. O'Connell. Go right in." Principal Thompson's office exuded manufactured authority. The imposing mahogany desk, the wall of diplomas, the obligatory photo, shaking hands with the town's mayor. A large man, with a perpetually ruddy complexion, Thompson typically projected calm competence through a booming voice. But today, he appeared unsettled, his tie askew, his hair faintly disheveled. "James, good to see you. What can I do for you?" he inquired, gesturing toward a chair. James remained planted. "I'm here regarding Mr. Clark." Thompson frowned. "Is there a problem?" "Yes, there's a problem," James said, his voice a low rumble. "A significant one." He retrieved his phone. "I possess evidence of Mr. Clark engaging in inappropriate conduct with my son." A shadow crossed Thompson's face. "What exactly are you talking about?" James held up the device. "I recorded a conversation between Mr. Clark and Michael. I suggest you listen." He tapped play. Michael's guileless voice filled the space, followed by Clark's silken, manipulative entreaties. As the recording played, James scrutinized Thompson's expression. Disbelief yielded to dawning horror, then a grim understanding. When the recording ceased, a heavy silence descended. Thompson stared, his face ashen. "Where did you obtain this?" he finally whispered. "That's immaterial," James countered. "What matters is your response." "This is incredible," Thompson stammered, running a hand through his thinning hair. "I'll need to investigate." "Investigate?" "You just heard it. He's exploiting children, capitalizing on their kindness, taking their lunches." James's voice almost broke with contained fury. "This isn't a minor infraction, Thompson. This is predatory." Thompson rose, planting his hands on the desk. "I understand your concern, James. Truly. But we must adhere to protocol. We have to hear Mr. Clark's perspective." "His perspective?" James scoffed. "Is he going to deny it? Will you allow him to worm his way out with some carefully constructed lie?" "We must be impartial, James." "Impartial? What about Michael? What about the other children who might be subjected to this?" James advanced towards the desk, his voice rising. "I've presented irrefutable proof. I expect immediate action." Thompson sighed, his shoulders visibly sagging. "All right, James. I will suspend Mr. Clark, pending a full investigation." "Suspend him?" James challenged, his eyes narrowing. "That's all. A suspension. He needs to be terminated. He needs to be kept away from impressionable children." "I can't do that without due process, James. You know that." "Then initiate it," James demanded, his voice like steel. "And I demand to be informed at every stage. I want to know the individuals you consult, the questions posed, and the measures implemented. Should I perceive any lack of seriousness, I will alert the authorities. Do you comprehend?" Thompson nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on James. "Understand, James. I assure you, we will treat this with the utmost seriousness." James held his gaze, searching for sincerity. He detected a flicker of apprehension in Thompson's eyes, offering a sliver of grim satisfaction. "Good," James said, pivoting to leave. "Because should anything befall Michael, should he endure any further harm because of this, you will be hearing from my legal counsel." He strode from the office, leaving Thompson alone, his face creased with worry. As he returned to his car, a wave of depletion washed over James. The adrenaline receded, leaving him emotionally exposed and weary. He remained uncertain if he had accomplished enough. He wasn't convinced of Michael's complete safety. Yet, he had initiated the fight. He had confronted the threat, and he would continue to wage this battle, defending his son, regardless of the cost. The simmering anger persisted, a perpetual reminder of the struggle ahead. Principal Thompson's promise. Principal Thompson leaned back, the chair's worn leather sighing in protest. The color had leached from her face, rendering her skin a ghostly pallor. Her gaze, usually so incisive, was now stretched wide with a dismaying blend of incredulity and dread. The damning audio replayed in her mind, each calculated phrase, each insidious manipulation woven by Mr. Clark, a psychic blow. The office's perfumed air, usually a neutral presence, now felt cloying, oppressive. Silence descended with the recording's end, punctuated only by the electric drone of the overhead lights. A nervous drumbeat pulsed from Thompson's fingertips against the glossy mahogany of her desk, the reflected light exacerbating her agitation. "Mr. O'Connell," she finally managed, her voice a thin thread. Words fail me. This is profoundly disturbing. Clark's credentials were unimpeachable, his references stellar. She shook her head, as if trying to dispel the auditory evidence. "Such conduct simply has no place here. None whatsoever." James stood firm, his gaze unwavering, fixed on the principal. He allowed her initial shock its course, understanding the need for mental recalibration. Still, his patience possessed limits. He sought assurances, tangible measures. "I understand your surprise, Principal Thompson," James stated, his tone measured yet resolute. "But surprise offers little solace. My son, and potentially others, has suffered this man's predatory nature. What concrete steps will you take and when?" Thompson swallowed, rallying her composure. Her fingers formed a steeple, a gesture James recognized as bureaucratic maneuvering. "Of course, action is paramount. Mr. Clark is hereby placed on administrative leave, effective immediately. I will personally see him off the premises, ensuring zero further contact with students. I can guarantee that as a first step." James offered a nod, a fraction of the tension easing. A beginning, certainly, but far from sufficient. This wasn't an isolated lapse. This was a deliberate pattern, meticulously crafted to exploit a child's vulnerability. "Understood," Thompson responded, her voice regaining authority. "And I assure you, this will face thorough investigation. Protocols are in place for such instances. I will contact the district superintendent and legal counsel first thing. We must interview Mr. Clark, certainly, but more crucially, we require testimony from other students. Discreetly, of course." James leaned forward. "Discretion is paramount. I can't permit Michael to feel stigmatized or somehow culpable. He is the injured party here." "Absolutely," Thompson reassured. "His well-being is our sole concern. Our school psychologist, Dr. Ramirez, is exceptionally skilled. I'd strongly suggest Michael consult with her to help navigate this ordeal. Entirely voluntary, naturally." James weighed this. Counseling hadn't crossed his mind, but perhaps it was beneficial. He didn't want Michael bearing this burden alone. "I'll discuss it with him. However, I wish to attend the initial consultation, if permissible." "Of course," Thompson acceded readily. "Whatever fosters comfort for you and Michael. I will also be scrutinizing Mr. Clark's entire personnel file, background checks, the works. I need to ascertain how this was even possible." A furrow deepened between her brows, genuine concern etched there. "This reflects poorly on me, Mr. O'Connell, on this institution as a whole. I intend to uncover the truth." James scrutinized her, seeking confirmation of her sincerity. He knew that institutions, like individuals, often prioritized reputation over justice. Yet, he perceived a genuine element of shock and dismay beneath Thompson's professional mask. He chose to extend the benefit of the doubt, for now. "I appreciate that, Principal Thompson, sincerely. But I require more than words. I need demonstrable action. I must know you are exerting every effort to prevent recurrence, to Michael or any other child entrusted to your care." "You have my word, Mr. O'Connell," Thompson said, meeting his gaze directly. "I will not rest until I am satisfied this matter has been fully resolved. Mr. Clark's actions represent a violation of the sacred trust we place in our educators. It will not be countenanced." She rose, extending her hand across the desk. James gripped it firmly, the gesture a silent acknowledgement of the gravity of the situation and the weight of Thompson's pledge. As James turned to depart, Thompson added, "Mr. O'Connell, thank you for bringing this to light. It required courage, and I assure you it will not be in vain." Exiting the principal's office, James felt a sliver of relief, tinged with lingering unease. He had secured Clark's suspension, at least temporarily, and Thompson seemed sincerely committed to investigation. However, he knew bureaucratic machinery often moved at a glacial pace, and that promises could shatter. He strode down the corridor, the school's ambience swirling around him. Youthful voices, the metronomic rhythm of sneakers on tile, the distant melodies from the band room. The ordinary symphony of school life seemed jarringly amplified by the day's intensity. He thought of Michael, safe within their home, blissfully ignorant of the full scope of events. He reached for his phone, his thumb hovering above Michael's contact. He yearned to call, to reassure, to declare everything all right. But he hesitated. What could he articulate? How to convey the complexities without causing further alarm? He chose to wait until he arrived home, until he could embrace him and communicate face to face. Outside, the afternoon sunlight painted long shadows across the asphalt. James proceeded toward his car, his thoughts churning, anticipating his forthcoming actions. He would contact Dr. Ramirez, the psychologist, and arrange a consultation for Michael. Vigilance would be key, carefully observing the interactions around school, watching for any trace of maltreatment. He knew this moment represented only the first engagement. The conflict to safeguard Michael, to defend him against the world's shadows, had only just begun. Yet he stood ready. He would do everything, regardless of the cost. Because that's what fathers do. They defend their children, even against the monsters lurking in plain sight. The accusation. The summons arrived with icy precision. A stark white note, pinned against the faculty room bulletin board's drab green, demanded Mr. Clark's immediate presence in Principal Thompson's office. He scanned it twice, a queasy feeling churning in his gut, unrelated to the stale coffee he'd forced down. He'd sensed scrutiny all morning, a subtle shift in the air, conversations abruptly silenced at his approach. He straightened his tie, an involuntary gesture betraying his unease, and made his way to Thompson's office. The door stood slightly ajar, admitting a low drone of speech, undoubtedly Thompson's. He rapped lightly. The drone ceased. "Come in." Thompson's voice, devoid of its customary cordiality, was clipped. Clark entered, forcing a smile that felt unnatural on his lips. "You wanted to see me, Principal Thompson?" He gestured vaguely toward the closed portal behind him. Thompson remained seated behind her imposing desk, her face a mask. The room felt heavy, electric. She offered no invitation to sit. Instead, she tinted her fingers, her gaze piercing and unwavering. "Mr. Clark," she started, her tone deliberate, "we've come into possession of disturbing information." She paused, letting the gravity of her statement sink in. Information pointing to a grave breach of trust, a violation of the ethical code we adhere to at Northwood. He swallowed, his mouth suddenly parched. "I'm afraid I don't follow." He attempted a light laugh, a feeble sound swallowed by the sterile ambience. Thompson's gaze remained fixed. "I have here," she tapped an open folder on her desk, "a recording, an audio record of a dialogue between yourself and one of our students, Michael O'Connell." All color fled from Mr. Clark's face. A dizzy spell threatened, and he reached for the back of a chair, needing its support. "Michael? I provide him with extra help after school. He's a sharp boy." Thompson arched an eyebrow, a glimmer of skepticism in her expression. "This recording suggests a far different dynamic, Mr. Clark, one that transcends the bounds of mere academic assistance." She slid the folder across the desk. "I suggest you give it a listen." He hesitated, his hand hovering. He knew what awaited him. He understood, with chilling certainty, that the carefully maintained illusion he had cultivated was about to shatter. With unsteady hands, he picked up the folder and withdrew a small digital recorder. He hit play. Static crackled. Then Michael's tentative voice filled the room. "Mr. Clark, I'm really hungry." Clark winced, steeling himself. Then his own voice, smooth and coaxing. "Michael, you recall our discussion. Some individuals are in greater need than yourself. You possess strength you can manage. It's an act of altruism, a sacrifice." The recording continued, the subtle manipulation laid bare. He could discern the boy's mounting distress, the delicate pressure he had exerted, the gradual crumbling of Michael's resolve. He killed the recording, his face burning. This lacks context. It's not what it appears to be." His voice was raspy, barely audible. Thompson leaned forward, her eyes narrowed to slits. Out of context, Mr. Clark. Clarify for me how a teacher repeatedly persuading a student to forego his lunch, to the extent of the child experiencing hunger, is devoid of its proper context. He stammered, scrambling for justification, any justification. He desired to assist. There exists a family in hardship. I'm acquainted with them. They are struggling. Michael volunteered to donate his lunch. I simply facilitated his charitable impulse. And you deemed it unnecessary to notify the parents of this charitable impulse. Thompson's voice dripped with acid. He shook his head, his eyes darting around, searching for an exit. It was a spontaneous gesture. I sought to avoid undue attention. I sought to spare the family embarrassment. So you opted to embarrass and potentially endanger a student instead. Thompson's voice gained volume, her carefully maintained composure beginning to unravel. Mr. Clark, this recording is irrefutable. It depicts manipulation, coercion, and a complete disregard for the well-being of a student entrusted to your charge. He shifted strategies, attempting deflection. That boy, Michael, has always been somewhat sensitive. Perhaps my intentions were misconstrued. Perhaps he is exaggerating. Thompson slammed her hand against the desk, the sharp sound echoing in the confined space. Do not dare attempt to place blame upon the victim, Mr. Clark. I have examined the recording. I have perceived the inflection of your voice, the subtle duress you employed. I will not condone such behavior within my school. He realized he was trapped. He understood that further denial would be futile. He sank into the chair he had previously been denied, his defiance evaporating. What transpires now? He inquired, his voice barely above a whisper. Thompson inhaled deeply, regaining her control. Effective immediately, you were placed on paid suspension pending a thorough investigation. You are prohibited from contacting any students, parents, or staff members during this interim. Your access to school property is rescinded. Do you comprehend? He nodded slowly, his gaze locked on the floor. The weight of his culpability, the potential ramifications, crashed over him like a tidal wave. His career, his standing, all balanced precariously on the precipice of destruction. I comprehend, he mumbled. Thompson rose, signaling the termination of the meeting. I advise you to procure legal representation, Mr. Clark. This matter is far from resolution. She moved to the doorway and opened it, her expression icy and dismissive. He rose unsteadily and walked toward the exit. As he passed Thompson, he chanced one last, desperate appeal. Please, Principal Thompson, reflect upon the good I have accomplished here. I am a devoted educator. This was an error, a misunderstanding. Thompson offered no response. She merely held the door open, her silence more condemning than any spoken words. He exited the office, the burden of the accusation crushing him. The eyes he had sensed earlier now seemed sharper, more judgmental. He was an outcast, exposed and disgraced. As he walked toward his car, he knew that his life would be irrevocably altered. The meticulously constructed facade had crumbled, shattered by a recording and the unwavering resolve of a principal to safeguard her students. He glanced back at the school, a locale that had once been his sanctuary, now a testament to his downfall. The windows seemed to stare back, cold and relentless. Suspension. The air in Principal Thompson's office congealed after her pronouncement, snuffing out the last vestiges of Mr. Clark's bravado like a wet cloth on hot coals. The crimson drained from his face, leaving it the color of skimmed milk, the defiant flush replaced by a sickly pallor. He blinked, a protracted, deliberate movement, as though struggling to reconcile her words with reality. Suspended? The question emerged as a parched scrape, barely louder than a breath. He fought to swallow, the bob of his atoms apple stark against his suddenly hollow throat. Based on what? Thompson remained unmoved. She leaned back, the aged leather of her chair sighing softly in protest. The basis is quite evident, Mr. Clark. The recording provides all the clarity we require. Coercing a student, any student to surrender their lunch is simply out of the question. The manipulative strategies you saw fit to employ, they are beyond the pale. He shifted strategies, grasping at straws. But it was all in good fun. No harm was done. Michael's a smart kid. He understood the game. Fun. A flinty edge entered Thompson's voice, her gaze hardening to glacial. Exploiting a child's inherent kindness isn't entertainment, Mr. Clark. It's a betrayal of trust, a violation of the core values this institution stands for. And don't patronize me by suggesting Michael understood. He was deliberately played, pure and simple. She lifted a well-worn file from the desk, its edges softened by time. This suspension takes effect immediately. You are relieved of all teaching responsibilities. Contact with students or staff associated with this school is forbidden. Furthermore, you are not to enter school property for any reason moving forward. Mr. Clark's tightly clasped hands began to tremble visibly. He started to speak, then clamped his mouth shut, a silent battle raging between frustration and encroaching alarm. He raked a hand through his thinning hair, dislodging a few strands that floated earthward, unnoticed. But my career, he finally choked out, the words raw with undisguised dread. Thompson's expression softened, microscopically. Not pity resided there, but a severe acknowledgement of the repercussions. That matter will be determined by the board. They will instigate a comprehensive inquiry, examining the recording, interviewing both students and staff, and evaluating the full scope of your actions. She paused, allowing her words to resonate. Let me be blunt, Mr. Clark. Given the evidence at hand, the odds of your return to this campus, or any within this district, are negligible. The office seemed to chill further, the fluorescent lights humming with a sinister resonance. Mr. Clark seemed to deflate in his chair, shoulders slumping, gaze locked on the worn nap of the rug. The fight had evaporated, replaced by the hollow echo of defeat. How soon? How soon must I vacate? He murmured, his voice barely audible. Immediately, Thompson stated firm, gather your personal effects from your classroom. Security will escort you from the premises. She rose, a clear signal of dismissal. Mr. Clark remained seated for another moment, paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of events. He lifted his gaze to Thompson, a flicker of something unreadable, perhaps resentment, perhaps a distorted conviction of unfairness, sparking in his eyes. But it died quickly, replaced by a dull, resigned acceptance. He pushed himself up slowly, his movements stiff and unnatural. He avoided Thompson's eyes as he turned toward the door. His steps lacked assurance, as if he were navigating a new and hostile landscape. As he reached the threshold, he paused, his hand hovering above the handle. He glanced back at Thompson, his face a blank canvas of forced composure. This isn't finished, he uttered, the words barely there. Thompson simply regarded him, her expression inscrutable. She offered no reply, no reaction. Her judgment was delivered, and nothing remained to be said. Mr. Clark opened the door and stepped into the corridor. The everyday sounds of the school, students chattering, the chime of the bell, the low drone of the ventilation, seemed amplified, mocking his sudden demise. He shuffled down the hall, toward his classroom, head lowered, shoulders bowed. He felt the weight of the students' gazes, their whispers trailing him like shadows. He attempted to block it out, to focus on the task at hand, but the shame seared his chest like a brand. He reached his classroom and entered, the door clicking shut behind him. The room felt foreign, unfamiliar, as though viewed through someone else's eyes. The posters, the orderly rows of desks, the stacks of textbooks, each a silent accusation, a stark reminder of the life he was about to forfeit. He moved mechanically, collecting his personal belongings, a family portrait in a frame, a dog-eared copy of a beloved novel, little mementos gathered across time. He crammed them into a cardboard box, his movements abrupt and clumsy. As he worked, he caught sight of his reflection in the window. He scarcely recognized the man staring back. His face was gaunt and ashen, his eyes hollow, his hair a mess. He resembled a faded version of himself, a shadow of the person he once knew. A knock sounded on the door. He froze, his heart hammering against his ribs. He knew who waited on the other side. He took a steadying breath and opened the door. Two security guards stood there, their faces blank, their eyes unwavering. "Mr. Clark," one of them stated, his voice devoid of inflection. "We are here to escort you off the premises." He nodded, his throat tight with suppressed emotion. He hoisted the cardboard box and followed them out of the classroom, head down, spirit broken. As he walked down the hallway, he felt the crushing weight of his disgrace bearing down on him, threatening to collapse him. He knew that his life had been irrevocably altered. He had committed a grave error, a mistake that would haunt him for years to come. He reached the main entrance and stepped out into the glaring sunlight. He hesitated momentarily, shielding his eyes. He glanced back at the school, the imposing structure that had been his sanctuary for so many years. A stab of regret pierced him, a surge of longing for the life that had slipped away. But it was too late to salvage. The damage had been done. There was no turning back. He turned and walked away, shoulders slumped, head bowed, his future uncertain. The school, once a beacon of his hopes and aspirations, receded into the distance, fading into obscurity. He was alone, lost in a sea of uncertainty, with only the burden of his shame for company. The suspension was over. But for James, this was just the beginning. Truth and tears. The astringent tang of pine cleaner stung James's nostrils as he all but bolted through the doorway. A preemptive call had alerted Sarah to his early return, though he'd kept the reason vague. Confiding in Michael directly, being present to witness his reaction, was paramount. The digital file in his pocket felt like a brand, a tangible symbol of the violation he'd uncovered. Sarah intercepted him in the hall, worry etched on her face. "James, what is it? You sounded terrified on the phone." He squeezed her hand, managing a weak smile. "I'll explain later. Where's Michael?" "Upstairs with his homework. He actually seemed brighter today, less withdrawn." "Good." Perhaps even a temporary reprieve from Clark's presence had begun to alleviate the burden. He ascended the stairs rapidly, his pulse echoing in his ears. Pausing before Michael's room, he inhaled deeply for composure and knocked. "Come in," came the muffled reply. Inside, Michael sat hunched at his desk, besieged by textbooks. He glanced up, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "Dad, what brings you home so soon?" James settled on the bed's edge, the old springs protesting beneath him. Delicacy was paramount. This needed to be handled with care. "Michael, remember our talks about honesty? About telling me if anything was troubling you?" Michael nodded slowly, absently fraying a thread on his jeans. I know about Mr. Clark." The blood seemed to drain from Michael's face. He stopped picking at the thread, his hands now clenched white-knuckled in his lap. "You know," James reached for one of Michael's hands, finding it icy and damp. "I know he's been taking your lunch. I know he's been putting pressure on you." Michael's gaze darted anxiously around the room, as if seeking an exit. How did you find out?" James hesitated. Revealing his surveillance felt wrong, but honesty demanded it now. "I was concerned, Michael. You seemed different, and your appetite vanished. So I recorded some of your conversations with him." Michael recoiled, snatching his hand back. "You eavesdropped on me?" The accusation hung heavily, thick with betrayal. "I know it wasn't ideal," James admitted quickly, his voice thick with remorse. "But I had to understand what was happening. I needed to safeguard you." He retrieved his phone and extended it toward Michael. "I want you to hear this." Michael regarded the phone with an expression of utter revulsion. He shook his head vehemently. "I don't want to." "Please, Michael. It's critical. It'll illuminate everything." With trembling fingers, Michael accepted the device. James guided him to play the recording. The faint sound of Michael's own voice filled the space, hesitant and vulnerable. Then, Clark's voice entered, silken and manipulative, spinning its deceptive narrative. As the recording progressed, Michael's features contorted with pain. He squeezed his eyes shut, tears breaching the surface and tracing paths down his cheeks. He endured it all, his body shuddering with suppressed anguish. When the recording finished, he flung the phone onto the bed and buried his face in his hands. He made me believe I was being helpful, he stammered, voice choked, that I was doing something worthwhile for him. James enveloped Michael in a tight embrace, holding him close as he wept. I know, son. I know. He's a master manipulator, Michael. He deceived you. This isn't your burden to bear. Michael clung to him, his small frame trembling. But everyone will discover the truth. They'll all assume I'm foolish. Nobody will think that, Michael. And if some do, they're profoundly mistaken. You were demonstrating kindness, empathy. He exploited that. The blame rests squarely with him, not you. James's hold tightened, and he won't be doing it ever again. I swear it. He drew back a little, cupping Michael's face in his palms. Principal Thompson has suspended Mr. Clark. There's an impending investigation. He won't be teaching at your school anymore. A spark of hope ignited within Michael's tear-soaked eyes. Really, I ensured it. James gently brushed a stray lock of hair from Michael's brow. I went to the school and presented the evidence. They believed me, Michael. They believed you. The tears persisted, but now they carried a different quality, a sense of catharsis, of comprehension, of finally being validated and understood. I was so terrified to confide in you, Michael murmured, his voice thick with emotion. I feared you'd be furious with me. Furious? Never. I'm just profoundly grateful you're safe now. James enveloped him even tighter, and I'm immensely proud of your courage in confronting that recording. It required immense strength. They remained entwined for a time, father and son, cocooned in reassurance and comfort. The sobs gradually waned, supplanted by soft sniffles. At last, Michael eased back, swiping at his eyes with his hand. I'm hungry. James offered a genuine smile, one that lit up his whole face. I suspected you might be. How about we head downstairs and whip up some of your favorite mac and cheese? Extra cheese, naturally. Michael returned a faint smile. Okay. Descending the stairs, James maintained an arm around Michael's shoulders, a silent testament to his protection and unwavering support. The residual odor of pine cleaner persisted, but its effect was diminished, less like a harsh attempt to conceal something unsavory. Now, it simply registered as the familiar scent of home, a sanctuary where truth could surface, tears could flow freely, and healing could commence. A father's promise. The heart monitor's steady pulse faded into the background hum as James cradled his son, the slight tremor in the small frame pressed against him a stark reminder of the ordeal. The recording's impact resonated beyond Clark's words. It was the sheer, exposed innocence in Michael's voice, the hesitant agreement that underscored the manipulative dynamic. Holding him now, acutely aware of his son's vulnerability, James yearned to erase every vestige of Clark from their existence. He drew Michael closer, a firm embrace meant to convey strength, resolve. The familiar scent of Michael's hair, a blend of sun-warmed skin and youthful energy, was a poignant counterpoint to the bitter bile of fury that had been churning within him for days. It's all right, Mikey, he murmured, his voice thick with unshed tears. It's all right now. He won't ever touch you again. Michael sniffled, burrowing deeper into the haven of James's shoulder. Do you promise? The single word, heavy with an aching plea for assurance, hit him like a physical blow. James gently tilted Michael's face upward, framing it with his hands. The eyes that usually sparkled with youthful exuberance were now shadowed with lingering trepidation, a residue of the insidious influence he had endured. I swear it, James vowed, his voice rock solid. I swear it, Mike. I will always be your protector. Always. He brushed a stray lock from Michael's brow, his touch feather-light. You understand that? Always. He watched as a spark of comprehension, of fragile hope, ignited in Michael's gaze. Always, Michael echoed softly, tasting the word, drawing comfort from its unwavering certainty. A wave of realization crashed over James, heavier than before. This wasn't solely about Clark anymore. This was about mending shattered trust, ensuring Michael never again felt so utterly helpless. It demanded that he become the bulwark he should have been all along. Feeling peckish, James inquired, shifting gears, intent on drawing Michael away from the shadows and towards something real, something tangible. Michael offered a slight, almost imperceptible shrug. "Anything your heart desires," James urged, gripped by a sudden, desperate need to immerse his son in normalcy, in solace, in undeniable proof that goodness still thrived. "Pizza? Ice cream? Or maybe we can whip up those crazy hot dog things you love with the cheese tucked inside." A flicker of a smile graced Michael's lips. "The piggies and blankets?" James chuckled, a wave of relief washing over him. "The piggies and blankets it is. Anything, everything, as much as you can possibly manage." He enveloped Michael in another embrace. "You will never go hungry, Mikey. Never. You'll never have to worry about empty bellies." These words were not just a promise to Michael, but a vow seared into James's very soul. The ensuing quiet was far from oppressive. It was a sanctuary, a renewed connection forged in the crucible of betrayal and fear. James could feel the residual tension gradually draining from Michael's small frame, replaced by a delicate tranquility. Later, after Michael had gleefully devoured 2 piggies and blankets and demolished a bowl of ice cream, James tucked him into bed. The room glowed softly, illuminated by a rocket-shaped night light that painted gentle patterns on the walls. "Dad!" Michael's voice, barely a whisper, drifted from the bed. James settled onto the edge, his hand resting reassuringly on Michael's arm. "Yes, pal. Mr. Clark?" He said I owed him. James's jaw clenched. "You owed him nothing, Mikey. He was wrong. He was lying through his teeth. Do you understand? You owed him absolutely nothing." He reiterated the phrase, determined to hammer it into Michael's subconscious, to eradicate the poisonous seed of guilt that Clark had planted. Michael offered a slow nod. "Okay, and you are not in trouble," James continued firmly. "You did nothing wrong. You were incredibly brave. You told me what was happening, and that was the right thing to do. You're the bravest kid I know." He gave Michael's arm a gentle squeeze. He paused, carefully selecting his next words, searching for the precise phrasing that would pierce through the fear and confusion. "Listen, Mikey, sometimes grown-ups blunder. Sometimes they commit terrible acts. It's never your fault when that transpires. Never. Understand?" Michael gazed up at him, his eyes wide and questioning. "Never. Never," James confirmed, his tone resolute. "And I vow to you, I will always be here to defend you from those terrible acts. Always. That's what dads are for." He bent down and pressed a kiss to Michael's forehead. "I love you, Mikey, more than anything this world has to offer." "I love you too, Dad," Michael whispered, his eyelids already beginning to droop. James remained there for a long while, keeping watch over his slumbering son, listening to the gentle rhythm of his breathing. The rocket nightlight cast dancing shadows against the wall, a silent harbinger of future adventures, of a life in which Michael could once again embrace childhood, unburdened by fear, untouched by manipulation, free to soar into the world with the unwavering support of a father who would perpetually be there to catch him. He knew the path ahead would be fraught with challenges. There would be meetings at school, sessions with therapists, and the constant shadow of Clark's potential vengeance. But in that moment, as he watched his son sleep, James felt a surge of resolve, a renewed dedication to safeguarding the most precious treasure in his existence. He was a father, and his promise would be kept. Healing begins. The following morning, James occupied the kitchen, a beacon of serenity amidst the usual breakfast pandemonium. Each meticulously carved apple slice was destined for Michael's lunch, nestled alongside a homemade granola bar and a small container of honey-kissed Greek yogurt. More than just sustenance, he was packing solace, a touchable symbol of his unwavering dedication. A cheerful sticky note adorned the yogurt lid. "You are loved. You are strong." While cereal was Michael's typical hurried fare, James insisted on a fortifying breakfast today. Scrambled eggs, prepared precisely to Michael's preference. A touch underdone, graced the plate. He observed Michael eat, a faint crease marring his brow. "Everything all right, buddy?" James inquired, his tone carefully light. Michael nodded, toying with the eggs. "Yeah, Dad. Just knackered." James refrained from probing, understanding that recovery was a gradual process. Instead, he concentrated on cultivating an oasis of normalcy, a realm where Michael could simply be a boy again. Afterwards, James accompanied Michael to the bus stop, a ritual abandoned years ago. There he stood, a silent guardian, until the colossal yellow bus devoured Michael. The day inched forward. James compulsively checked his phone, suppressing the urge to contact the school. Though Principal Thompson spearheaded the investigation, the wait proved agonizing. He pictured Clark stewing in his apartment, plotting revenge, his resentment a slow burn. James reminded himself that Clark was contained, suspended, bereft of his authority. Yet the man's insidious nature, his talent for manipulation, sparked a deeper disquiet than any physical threat. That evening, James prepared Michael's favorite, spaghetti and meatballs. He even treated them to the premium Parmesan. He encouraged Michael to share details of his day, but avoided pressuring him. He listened attentively, offering gentle cues, utterly focused on his son. He heard about a science project centered on DIY volcanoes, a minor disagreement on a basketball court, and an uproarious meme spreading through the school. Not a word about Clark. Later, James proposed a movie night. A light-hearted superhero film, complete with popcorn and snug blankets, was selected. As Michael chuckled at an outlandish scene, James felt a spark of hope ignite. It wasn't a complete obliteration of the trauma, but a beginning nonetheless. The following days mirrored this pattern. James maintained a consistent, unwavering presence. He packed lunches brimming with goodies, ensured Michael enjoyed a nourishing breakfast, walked him to the bus stop, and fostered a welcoming, encouraging atmosphere at home. He even began inserting small surprises into Michael's backpack: a fresh comic, a packet of Pokemon cards, a whimsical trinket discovered online. Miniature expressions of affection, constant reminders of his love and value. One afternoon, Principal Thompson phoned. James's stomach clenched. "Mr. O'Connell," Thompson began, his voice somber, "I wish to provide an update regarding the investigation. After interviewing several students and staff, the gathered evidence supports your account. Mr. Clark's employment with the school has been terminated." James exhaled, a wave of relief surging through him. "And the police? Given the gravity of the allegations, we deemed it prudent to involve law enforcement. They have initiated their own investigation." "Thank you, Principal Thompson," James replied, his voice strained. "I appreciate your prompt action." The news offered a degree of solace, yet failed to fully extinguish James's apprehension. He knew Clark remained at large, and he couldn't shake the premonition that this ordeal was far from over. Later that night, Michael appeared downstairs, a tentative look on his face. "Dad!" James glanced up from his book, his heart skipping a beat. "What's up, buddy?" "Mr. Evans invited me to partner with him for the science project," Michael divulged, his voice barely audible. "The volcano one." Mr. Evans, another math instructor, was widely respected and admired. James smiled. "That's wonderful, Michael. Mr. Evans is a good man." Michael shuffled his feet. "Yeah, but he knows about Mr. Clark." James nodded, his expression gentling. "He does, and he still wants to work with you. Because you're a bright, capable young man, Michael, and because he wants to help." Michael looked up, his eyes filled with uncertainty. "Really?" James knelt, placing his hands on Michael's shoulders. "Really? There are good people in the world, Michael. People who care. People who want to help you recover." He drew Michael into a comforting embrace, holding him close. He felt Michael's tension gradually dissipate. "I'm still scared, Dad," Michael whispered. "I know you are." James soothed, his voice thick with emotion. "And that's all right. But you're not alone. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." He held Michael in his arms for a long while, his presence a bulwark against the lingering fear. He knew the road ahead would be arduous and lengthy, but he was prepared. He would be Michael's guardian, his confidant, his steadfast foundation. He would assist him in rebuilding his trust, one careful step at a time. A week later, James discovered Michael humming contentedly as he labored on his science project. The baking soda volcano stood proudly on the kitchen counter, a testament to fortitude and the healing spirit. It was more than just a school assignment. It was a beacon of hope, a gentle reminder that even in the wake of devastation, life is resilient. And James knew, with absolute certainty, that Michael would triumph. Opening up, the silence at the dinner table had been a heavy blanket for weeks. Now, though a thread had been pulled, a tiny gap letting in a sliver of light. Michael was talking, not about theorems or historical dates, but about the mundane, the ant farm Mrs. Davison had brought in for science, the way Kevin choked on his milk during lunch, the new kid who wore mismatched socks every day. James listened, each word a small victory. He resisted the urge to steer the conversation, to probe for anything related to Clark. He knew pushing would only slam the door shut again. Instead, he focused on the details, asking questions that encouraged Michael to elaborate. He learned about the ants' intricate tunnels, Kevin's mortification, and the mismatched socks. One striped, one polka-dotted, a deliberate fashion statement, apparently. After dinner, as Michael cleared his plate, he paused. "Dad!" James's heart quickened, a familiar, knot tightening in his stomach. He met Michael's gaze, his expression carefully neutral. "Yeah, buddy. Mrs. Davison, she said something today about how it's okay to say no." The words hung in the air, fragile and loaded. James held his breath. "And what did you think about that?" he asked gently. Michael shrugged, avoiding eye contact. He carried his plate to the sink with exaggerated care. "I don't know. It's just hard, I guess." James rose and stood beside him, leaning against the counter. He didn't reach out, didn't want to crowd him. "Hard to say no to who, Michael?" The silence stretched, punctuated only by the gentle hum of the refrigerator. Finally, Michael spoke, his voice barely a whisper. To Mr. Clark." James's hand clenched into a fist at his side, but he kept his voice calm. "Why was it hard to say no to him, Michael?" Michael turned on the water, splashing soap onto his plate. He needed more," he mumbled. The lie, so blatant and pathetic, twisted James's gut. He knew that Clark hadn't needed anything. He'd manipulated, coerced, stolen. But he also knew that Michael still wasn't ready to fully confront the truth. "Needed what, Michael?" James pressed softly. "Needed your lunch." Michael nodded, his shoulders slumped. The water ran hot, steaming the air. He said he hadn't had breakfast, and that he was dizzy. "And you believed him?" Michael scrubbed harder at the plate, his knuckles white. I didn't know what to do. He was my teacher." James reached out then, placing a hand on Michael's shoulder. This time, Michael didn't flinch away. "It's okay, buddy," James said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's okay. You didn't do anything wrong." He felt Michael tremble beneath his hand. But I lied to you. I said I ate it." "I know," James said. "And it's okay that you lied. You were scared, but you don't have to be scared anymore. I'm here, and you can tell me anything, okay? Anything at all." Michael turned off the water and finally looked at James, his eyes red-rimmed. A single tear traced a path down his cheek. He said if I told anyone, he'd make sure I failed math. The confession, raw and vulnerable, hit James like a physical blow. The casual cruelty, the abuse of power, it made his blood boil. He pulled Michael into a hug, holding him tight. "He can't hurt you anymore, Michael. He's gone. And I promise, I won't let anyone hurt you ever again." They stood there for a long moment, James's arms wrapped tightly around his son. The tension in Michael's body gradually eased, replaced by a fragile sense of calm. Later that evening, after Michael was asleep, James sat in his study, staring at the report from the school investigation. It was a damning indictment of Clark's behavior, detailing not only the incident with Michael, but also several other instances of inappropriate conduct. The report recommended Clark's teaching license be revoked, but James found no satisfaction in it. The damage was done, the trust was broken, and the road to recovery was still long and uncertain. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in years. "Hello." A voice answered, groggy with sleep. "It's James O'Connell," he said. "I need your help. It's about Michael." He explained the situation, the manipulation, the threats. He told her everything. "I understand," she said, her voice now sharp and alert. "I'll be there tomorrow." He hung up the phone, a sliver of hope flickering in his chest. He wasn't alone in this. He had allies, and he would do whatever it took to protect his son. The next morning, Michael was noticeably brighter. He even cracked a joke about Mrs. Davison's ant farm, mimicking her overly enthusiastic tone. He ate a full breakfast, a stark contrast to the meager portions he'd been consuming for weeks. As they walked to the bus stop, Michael reached out and took James's hand. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. "Dad," he said, his voice hesitant. "Yeah, buddy. Can we still work on the volcano?" James squeezed his hand. "Absolutely," he said, his heart swelling with relief. "We'll build the best damn volcano this school has ever seen." The bus arrived, its yellow lights flashing. Michael climbed aboard, turning back to wave. James watched him go, a mixture of hope and trepidation swirling within him. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, he felt a glimmer of optimism. Michael was opening up, and that was all that mattered. He was still watching the bus when his visitor pulled into the drive, a sleek black car gleaming in the morning sun. Sarah Jenkins, a child psychologist, stepped out, a determined look on her face. "Let's talk," she said. "Justice served." The email arrived just after 6 p.m., a crisp digital announcement that felt like a physical weight lifting from James' shoulders. Subject: regarding Mr. Clark and school board decision. The terse language confirmed what Principal Thompson had only hinted at. Mr. Clark's employment had been terminated, effective immediately. James read it twice, then printed it out, the laser printer humming a mechanical song of resolution. He placed the sheet on the kitchen table, smoothing it with the flat of his hand. It wasn't a celebration. It was confirmation, validation. The system, for all its potential flaws, had worked. He found Michael in his room, meticulously constructing a Lego spaceship. The low hum of the television was a counterpoint to the click of plastic bricks. James leaned against the doorframe, watching him. "Hey, buddy," he said, his voice deliberately casual. "Got a minute?" Michael looked up, his face still holding a reserve that hadn't been there before. The shadows lingered, faint but present. "Sure, Dad." James walked over and sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to disturb the sprawling array of Lego pieces. "I got an email from the school." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "About Mr. Clark." Michael's hand stilled. His gaze flickered down to the spaceship, then back up to James. "What about him?" "He won't be teaching at the school anymore, Michael. The school board decided to let him go." A slow, cautious relief spread across Michael's face. It wasn't a wide, beaming smile, but a subtle relaxation of the muscles around his eyes. Really, he won't be there anymore. You don't have to worry about him." James reached out and gently squeezed Michael's shoulder. "Ever again." Michael nodded, then returned to his spaceship, but his movements were lighter, more fluid. The tension had visibly drained from his small frame. Principal Thompson also said the school is setting up some counseling for any students who might need it, James continued. "It's just someone to talk to, if you want. No pressure, okay." Michael didn't answer immediately. He fiddled with a small gray Lego piece, turning it over and over in his fingers. "Maybe," he mumbled finally. "That's okay. We can talk about it more later." "There are no bad answers here," James said. The next morning, James walked Michael to school. He usually let him go the last block by himself, a small act of independence. But today, he held on to Michael's backpack strap just a little longer. The atmosphere at the school felt different. Lighter somehow. The usual morning bustle was still there, but there was a subtle undercurrent of hope. Or maybe it was just James projecting his own feelings onto the scene. Principal Thompson was standing near the entrance, greeting students. When she saw James and Michael, she smiled warmly. "Good morning, Michael." "Good morning, Mr. O'Connell." "Good morning, Principal Thompson," James replied. She knelt down, bringing herself to Michael's level. Michael, I just wanted to tell you that we're all very glad you're here. And we're here for you, if you need anything at all. Anything, okay? Michael nodded, a shy smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Thompson stood up and turned to James. I know this has been a difficult time for you both, Mr. O'Connell. I want to assure you that we are committed to creating a safe and supportive learning environment for all our students. We're reviewing all our policies and procedures to ensure something like this never happens again. Her eyes, usually sharp and focused, held a genuine sincerity. The well-being of our students is our top priority. James met her gaze, acknowledging her words. I appreciate that, Principal Thompson. Thank you. He wanted to believe her, needed to believe her. As Michael walked through the doors into the school, James watched him go, a familiar wave of protectiveness washing over him. He knew this wasn't the end of the story. Healing would take time, but it was a start, a tangible step forward. Later that day, James received a phone call from Dr. Evans, the child psychologist. I have an opening next week, Mr. O'Connell. Would Tuesday afternoon work for Michael? Yes, that would be great, James said, relief flooding him. Thank you, Dr. Evans. It's my pleasure, Mr. O'Connell. I look forward to meeting with you both. That evening, James made Michael's favorite dinner, spaghetti and meatballs. He even let Michael pick out the movie for family movie night, a goofy animated film about talking animals. As they sat on the couch, sharing a bowl of popcorn, James felt a flicker of the old normalcy returning. During the movie, Michael leaned against him, his small body warm and reassuring. James wrapped his arm around him, pulling him closer. Dad, Michael said softly, his voice barely audible above the movie. Yeah, buddy? Do you think Mr. Clark will be okay? James hesitated. He didn't want to demonize the man, but he also didn't want to minimize what had happened. I don't know, Michael, he said honestly, but what he did wasn't right. And sometimes, when people do things that aren't right, they have to face the consequences. Michael was silent for a moment. What are consequences? It means that when you do something wrong, there are things that happen because of it, James explained. Like, if you don't do your homework, the consequence might be a bad grade. Or if you break a rule, the consequence might be a timeout. So, Mr. Clark is in timeout? Michael asked, his voice laced with a childish innocence that tugged at James' heart. James smiled gently. Something like that, yeah. He's in timeout. He looked down at Michael, the flickering light from the television dancing across his face. The shadows were still there, but they seemed a little lighter, a little less pronounced. Dad, Michael said again. Yes. Thanks for helping me. James squeezed him tighter. Always, Michael. Always. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks, difficult conversations, and moments of doubt. But in that moment, with his son safe in his arms, James felt a surge of hope. Justice, in its imperfect form, had been served. And that was enough to keep fighting for a brighter future. Lessons learned. Golden light slanted across the living room as James and Michael tumbled in a playful scuffle. Not the strained kind, a desperate attempt to reconnect. This was easy, punctuated by uninhibited laughter. Michael, nimble as a squirrel, briefly had James pinned before a theatrical groan signaled James's reversal of fortune. Got you, he roared, unleashing a flurry of tickles. Michael's ensuing peals of laughter were a balm to James's soul, a melody too long absent. Later, dusk painting the porch in shades of lavender and rose, Michael's voice was a quiet murmur. Dad, yeah, buddy. Remember how I used to dread math? James nodded, the homework battles and frustrated tears sharp in his memory. Dull. Feels like another lifetime, doesn't it? Michael shrugged. It's different. Mrs. Davison's great. Explains things without making me feel inadequate. Relief surged through James. Mrs. Davison, the replacement for Mr. Clark. The school had acted decisively, not merely suspending Clark, but installing someone genuinely attuned to the student's needs. That's fantastic, Michael. Really glad to hear it. A pause. You know, it's fine if you still don't adore math. Not everyone does. But as long as you're learning and feeling confident, that's all that matters. Michael nestled against James, a comfortable silence blooming between them, stitched with the chirping chorus of crickets. Gradually, school transformed from a minefield into something navigable for Michael. The initial anxiety receded, replaced by hesitant optimism. He began participating, hand tentatively raised, offering answers. He even took the plunge and joined a robotics club, a long-deferred ambition. James watched, the knot of apprehension in his gut slowly loosening. He made a point of being present, attending school functions, offering his time when possible, a silent reassurance that his son wasn't alone in the arena. One afternoon, picking Michael up, James spotted a gaggle of boys surrounding him, their faces alight with laughter. Michael was at the heart of it, weaving a story with animated gestures. A flicker of something akin to jealousy pricked James, immediately followed by a wave of profound pride. Michael was rebuilding connections, reclaiming his social footing, finding his tribe once more. At dinner, Michael's recounting of the day's events was charged with an enthusiasm James hadn't witnessed in months. A science experiment gone gloriously awry, a classmate's witty retort, the intricate challenges of their current robotics project. "Dad, you have to see the robot. It's going to be epic." James beamed. "I'd love to, Michael. How about I swing by after school one day this week?" Michael's face illuminated. "Really? That would be awesome." Lost in Michael's chatter, James reflected on recent weeks. The anger, the fear, the sleepless nights, still present, lurking in the shadows of his mind, yet pushed further back by Michael's rekindled joy. He pondered the recording, the stark evidence of Clark's manipulation, the principal's initial reluctance, the subsequent decisive response, the fragility of trust, especially between adults and the young lives in their care. He understood now that the most crucial lesson wasn't about exposing a predator or navigating bureaucratic hurdles. It was the sheer power of listening, truly hearing his child's voice, trusting his intuition, even when it whispered unsettling truths. He had always loved Michael, fiercely and without reservation. Yet this ordeal had deepened that love, revealing a reservoir of protective instinct he never knew he possessed. It showed him the lengths he would go to defend his son, even if it meant blurring the boundaries of acceptable conduct. He knew the path ahead wouldn't be smooth. There would be moments of uncertainty, moments of fear, times when Michael would need unwavering support. But he stood ready, more than ready. Later, after Michael drifted off to sleep, James sat on the porch, the cool night air enveloping him. He gazed at the stars, a tapestry of light flung across the inky sky. He recalled his own father, a remote figure in his upbringing. He had vowed to chart a different course, to be present, a bastion of strength for his own children. He'd stumbled along the way, he knew that. Imperfect, but he had striven, he had fought, and he had shielded his son. And that, he understood, was the essence of fatherhood. He closed his eyes, inhaling the night air, the sweet fragrance of honeysuckle, a comforting balm. He felt a sense of inner calm, a quiet assurance that all would be well. The corrosion of trust was a deep wound, one that demanded time to mend. But with patience, affection, and steadfast support, it could be repaired, rebuilt, and strengthened. And that, James knew, was a lesson etched in fire. The ability to perceive and act was the difference between a child imperiled and a child safe. His son was safe.